There has never been a film made without a producer, even if the producer may not have been credited as one or even thought they were fulfilling the role. Nevertheless, we wouldn't have films without producers. When a film wins for Best Picture, the producers are the ones who receive the awards. This being said, could you honestly answer the question, what does a producer do? It's a question that doesn't get asked very often, and when it does get asked, it can be hard to articulate a clear answer. The truth is, there's no one thing that a producer is or does. But to come to some sort of answer, it's worth understanding the different roles and responsibilities of a film producer. Before I dive into the roles and responsibilities, here's a brief history on the evolution of the film producer role. Film was born in 1894 when Thomas Edison opened the Black Maria Motion Picture Studio in New Jersey. Technically, Thomas Edison was one of the first U.S. motion picture producers. He helped produce short films at the Black Maria until it was torn down in 1903. By the time it was torn down, Edison had already moved on to a bigger studio in New York City. In the early 1900s, casts, budgets, and companies grew, making the role of the film producer more prominent. The role consisted of producers getting the film made and overseeing their productions. By the 1930s, movie production saw a big boom. For some films in this era, the producer became more well-known than its director. The highest-grossing film of all time, Gone with the Wind, was directed by Victor Fleming, but some people wouldn't consider him the auteur. David Selznick produced the film, and was the name most people associated the film with, aside from its stars. Also in the 1930s, films were controlled by studios that not only made and promoted the movies, but also distributed them and screened them in studio-owned theaters. At this time, film producers generally worked within the studio, taking on projects that were assigned to them. This shifted in 1948 after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the studios had established a monopoly and needed to give up control over screening the films they created. This caused a rise in independent distributors, which then gave independent film producers a way to bring their films to the public without going through the studios. These are the types of producers that are in Hollywood today. Most movies today are made by independent producers, either for direct distribution or under contract for one of the major studios. In 1950, 2 years after the Supreme Court ruling, a group of motion picture producers joined together to form the Screen Producers Guild, which is now known as the Producers Guild of America. Since the creation of this organization, the roles and responsibilities of film producers have only increased. In between 1950 to now, the Producers Guild of America has grown along with the industry. According to their mission, the PGA represents, protects, and promotes the interests of all members of the producing team. So what do they mean when they say producing team? This is where that question, what does a film producer do, comes in. In order to figure out what some of the responsibilities of a producer are, we first have to know what the different roles are. The producing team is comprised of producers and all those on the career path to being producers. Roles in a producing team may include any of the following. An executive producer, or EP, oversees the filmmaking process. Sometimes they oversee it from start to finish, or other times they will get an honorary executive producer role just for financing the movie. In some major productions, the executive producer may be a representative or CEO of the studio the film is under. An example of this would be Kathleen Kennedy, who is the president of Lucasfilms. She is considered one of the top producers in the industry right now, but she isn't typically involved in the hands-on process of making Star Wars films. She certainly has a great deal of input in the films and their financing, but she is too busy running the film studio to be involved in the day-to-day of a film. An example of a very hands-on executive producer would be Steven Soderbergh. He was the director of the film Magic Mike, but when the sequel Magic Mike XXL came along, he didn't reprise his role as the director. Instead, he served as a very active executive producer on the sequel. When he was EP of the film, he assisted in various areas, including cinematography and editing. The role that often gets a little hazy is the simple title of producer. The title could be given to anyone who played a crucial part in making sure the film was made. If you're looking at the credits of a film and want to know which producers actually did the day-to-day work, pay attention to the verbiage used. Typically, the producers who did a lot of work on the whole process of the film will be listed under produced by. According to Dennis Singh, who is a production manager for the AMC Movie News series, the PGA has been working on new tactics to give day-to-day producers appropriate recognition.
I've worked on the Producers Guild conference for the last few years, and one of the things that they've been pushing is this thing called the Producer's Mark. Mm-hmm. Which now, if you watch a movie, in the beginning credits, if you see like their name, let's say like a Kevin Feige, and you see PGA right behind it, that's like kind of almost like a certification of saying, okay, this person actually did something on this movie. So they're trying to, because of the question he asked, a lot of people don't know what producers do, so they want to make sure that the people who actually do work get the credit. Yeah.
There are still plenty more roles in a producing team that are really important, but sometimes all these roles can easily not exist depending on the budget of a film. A large studio film like a Marvel movie is expected to have at least one person in every role in a producing team. But an indie film may only have a handful of producers that fulfill every role. This is what brings us to what are the big general responsibilities of a producer. No matter what level producer you are, nothing can get done without some of the general requirements of a film. As mentioned when going over the roles, a producer is involved in the development of a film. Some producers may be involved in just the pre-production work like reading scripts or hiring the director. The producers decide what stories they want to get told, and it's not as easy as saying they think a script would make a good film. Something a lot of producers have to think about is whether or not the film will have the resources in order to tell the story how they want. Budgeting is a huge factor for a producer. When signing onto a project, a producer has to work with the studio and financiers to know the limitations they'll have on the visual storytelling. The movie Jurassic World had a budget of $150 million, and most of that came from its distributor, Universal Pictures. For a film like this, producers have a lot of leeway in the creative process, and they could create films like these that are almost guaranteed to be a box office success. Universal Pictures also distributed the film Get Out, which only had a budget of $4.5 million. One of the film's producers, Jason Blum, has seen a lot of success in his methodology that quality films can be made for way less. There is a really great series that The Hollywood Reporter has done with some of the producers of that year's most acclaimed films. In this most recent one, Jason Blum made his case in the company of some of Hollywood's most well-known producers.
But that's why I think we should all, to your point of making quality movies, I think it's going to be maybe slightly controversial, but the way to combat that is to bring the cost of the movie down.
I agree with that.
As soon as you pull the cost down...
How does that affect my fee?
It affects you do very well, you just get paid after the movie comes out.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you pull the price down of the movie, it doesn't matter about rights, it doesn't matter who's in the movie. It doesn't.
Well, the truth is,
Here combating Blum is Ridley Scott, who is an extremely credible producer and filmmaker. He recently produced the film Blade Runner 2049 with a budget of somewhere in between $150 and $185 million. He is known for his big budget hits and probably will never make a film for a budget under $100 million.
The price of the film. Every movie that we do is $5 million, and I don't do that. It's great that they're profitable. That's not why we do it. We do it for all the reasons we're talking about. How do you make edgy, different stuff and not have to cast so-and-so, not have to please so-and-so?
The worst
and the way we do it is by pushing
if
the budget
Ridley
down.
agrees with you.
To Blum's point, great stories can be told at almost any price, but it's all about the way or form a producer, director, or studio wants to tell them. Many producers have standards and stick to a tier of film, thus making themselves credible in that particular market. Once the budgeting is set, the producers have to make a lot of other decisions like the cast, director, locations, crew, and almost every other little detail you can think of. Producing is no easy job, but it's one of the most important in the entertainment industry. The next time you go into a film, look at the credits. After a while, you may start to recognize producers and see a trend in the types of movies they're a part of. You may come to realize you like a producer's style of film and follow their career. Producers could easily be your new favorite filmmakers.